This is Michael Popok, Legal AF. We have a trial date as of today for Steve Bannon and his crowdfunding fraud Build the Wall in New York State Supreme Court on New York charges brought by the Manhattan DA's office, presided over by Juan Merchan, the same judge that's presiding over Donald Trump and his trial that's going to happen in May. We've got a March 2024 trial date for Steve Bannon. He is going to trial on Build the Wall crowdfunding fraud related to his raising $15 million, promising people, in his own words, that all the money would go to build the wall, when he knew or should have known that that was a lie, that a lot of the money went into his back pocket and front pocket and all of his other pockets and bank accounts, and very little went to actually build the wall, which actually wasn't built at all. So you might be thinking to yourself out there, those that follow U.S. politics and law at the intersection like I do, didn't we already hear about this case? Wasn't he already pardoned by then President Trump on the very last day that President Trump was still president? On the way out of office on the 19th of January for just this thing, fraud related to Build the Wall Foundation? And you'd be right, except those were federal charges, because that's what the president can pardon of the United States when he's still president. He can pardon federal charges, not state charges. The Department of Justice had brought and indicted Bannon in the federal case almost identically, except they brought it under wire fraud, which is using emails, primarily what wire fraud means today, using emails to separate a donor from his money under a promise or a representation that is fraudulent. That is wire fraud. That is a federal crime. That is probably the number one way, mail and wire fraud, that the federal prosecutors bring down bad guys. So they indicted him for the very same fraudulent scheme, raising the $15 million under fraudulent promises and wire fraud, and indicted him. Except before he went to trial, before he could get convicted, although it doesn't matter, even after he was convicted, he would have got a pardon. Trump, in the very last day, very last night, 12th hour, gave Bannon a pardon. But that did not pardon him from state law violations. And as soon as that happened, Cy Vance, the then Manhattan District Attorney, before Alvin Bragg took over, he commenced almost like the next day a state court investigation. Took them over 2 years, and it went over and spilled over into the new prosecutor being elected in Manhattan, Alvin Bragg. But they brought a 6-count indictment against Steve Bannon. Almost reads the same when you read what happened, the facts, but the law is different because this is under New York state law and not under federal law. And the New York state law indictment is for 2 counts of money laundering, and then each of which carry a 5 to 15-year sentence, felony conspiracy, a fraud conspiracy as well with others. And the way that the hook to make it a state case versus a federal case is that, and this is hard to believe, being somebody that works in New York, there were 430 people based in Manhattan who actually donated up to $34,000 for this fraud. There's another 11,000 people in the state of New York that donated to Steve Bannon's fraud and gave him $730,000. So that gave the Manhattan DA the hook, the jurisdictional hook, to bring the case. And this is a case we don't have to worry about a pardon, because the governors of New York from time immemorial, except for one in recent history, have all been Democrat. So that the Democratic governors are not going to pardon Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon, who's my new nickname for him is Steve, I ain't going to prison Bannon, because that's what he said today when he was coming out of the hearing and told of the date. Has tried to delay this hearing as much as he possibly could, but Judgment Day, or at least the day when he found out what his trial was going to be, is the day before the Memorial Day weekend. First, he tried to fire his lawyers. He's used for a long time David Schein. David Schein, an Alabama-based lawyer. You might remember him. There were 2 lawyers that represented Donald Trump in his impeachment, his second impeachment trial. One was really tall. That guy's from Pennsylvania. One's really short. That's David Schein. And David Schein had went to the judge several months ago and said, I got to get out of this case. I got a client that's not communicating with me. He doesn't talk to me. He doesn't like me. He doesn't communicate with me. He doesn't really like my trial strategy. I got to get out. And the judge didn't believe it. But, he said, well, get your act together, Mr. Bannon. Get your counsel together. I'm not delaying the trial of your case. And in the meantime, 2 things happened. One, the discord alleged between Bannon and his lawyer, David Schein, was all BS. Because Bannon is using that very same lawyer, David Schein, to handle the appeal that's going on from him being convicted in July of 2 counts of contempt of Congress because he wouldn't testify to the Jan 6 committee. Remember that one? That's Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is looking down the barrel of a 4-year sentence for his contempt of Congress. He already got convicted of that over the summer. Why isn't he in jail? Why does he still get to podcast like I do? Because the federal judge gave him a reprieve because of his appellate grounds to sit out of jail while his appeal was going on. Now, that appeal just got started in the beginning of this month in May. And who filed the brief on behalf of Steve Bannon? David Schein. So David Schein's okay to handle the contempt hearing. Apparently, he's not good enough to handle New York criminal court proceeding. And so he got fired. And a new lawyer appeared. His name is Harlan Protas. Harlan Protas, a relatively well-known lawyer in New York doing criminal defense work. And just continuing to square the circle, he worked at a law firm called Clayman Rosenberg. He's now on his own, but he had worked at a law firm called Clayman Rosenberg. And Clayman Rosenberg is currently representing Alan Weisselberg, follow this at home, the disgraced, jailed felon, former chief financial officer of the Trump organization in all of his problems with the Manhattan DA's office. So here's the tangled web of lawyers and law firms in New York that are all representing Trump, Trump light, Trump Jr., Trump adjacent, Trump related, and the like. And we follow it here so you don't have to on hot takes just like this one on the MeidasTouch Network. I, Michael Popok, do these about every day. I mean, this weekend I'm doing them about every hour because of developments at the intersection of U.S. politics and law. We curate the best of these stories that we think you should know on a podcast called Legal AF. We do that on Wednesdays and Saturdays, also on the MeidasTouch Network. We do a live version if you want to see what we look like beyond this one on YouTube. And then you can pull on all your audio platforms our podcast, Legal AF. If you like this content, give me a thumbs up on this YouTube. It's appreciated. And I can take a look at the comments, and oftentimes I comment back. And then if you like what I'm doing, follow me, Michael Popok, on all things social media at MS Popok. This is Michael Popok, Legal AF reporting.
Hey, Meidas Mighty. Love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.